Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fashionably late spoilercast of the recent Nintendo game. These aren't only Nintendo games, but they've been so far because it hasn't worked out for my co-hosts and I. I am, of course, once again the reason that this is late. I am your host, Andy, and with me, as always, so far are my co-hosts Eli and Lyd for these things.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. I guess I should apologize. Once again, took me a little while. I think Forgotten Land is the only one of these that I've done in like a reasonable amount of time. But it's
We're
not.
even later than Yahtzee on this one.
He did take a sweet time with this. Anyway, uh, but we're here. We're ready to go. I guess honestly, before we even give our general thoughts, since it has been uh depending on what you want to count, 11 years since the last original 2D Zelda. Um do you want to go over our thoughts on the game going into release? Because I was watching the direct this premiered at with Eli, and I remember we both kind of had strong well, maybe not strong, but we both definitely had confused reactions to this. Let's say, Eli, would you like to go?
Yeah, so when I saw it, I remember that Princess Peach Showtime came out earlier that year. I was extremely skeptical of games starring Nintendo princesses, but also they showed the Deku Scrub, so at the same time I was on board.
Yeah. Lid.
I did not really know what to think. Um, I was definitely excited for a new original Zelda game. I became more skeptical when people realized that they were reusing a Link to the Past's map again, and I did not realize until the game was out, and I don't think this was publicly certain information until then, but I may be remembering wrong, that it was made by Grezzo.
Yeah, that's a thing that Nintendo has been doing a lot this gen of fuck you, we'll tell you who's making this game when it comes out. Um
I
I
mean, they didn't say beforehand that it was Grezzo, but I assumed it was because it was in the same style
Yeah,
as what
no. Yeah, it was kind of like
yeah.
it would have been surprising if it wasn't Grezzo, unlike with the new Mario and Luigi where it's like, "Oh, this was developed by the Octopath devs?" Never would have guessed that. Um so I guess to give people, to cuz if you go too far into a spoiler cast without doing like an intro, I find that it can be kind of confusing of like, okay, how much do these people like the game, like the thing they're talking about, or dislike, or so I think maybe doing a short little like general thoughts real quick is a good way to you know structure this. Um, I would say going first that I liked it. I think it definitely satisfied the wait for a 2D Zelda for me. It had a lot of things that like in 2D Zelda and Breath of the Wild. I'm like, oh, that's a clever spin on this, or I'm glad to see this again. Um, but I also definitely would not call it one of the stronger sequels in or stronger 2D Zelda games. I think that the like I don't think there are a ton of like real low points for this game outside of like one or two moments, but there also aren't a lot of real high highs for me compared to some of the best of 2D Zelda before this. So I don't know how long it'll be before I say replay this. And I am certainly in no rush to expect a sequel for this, but I did enjoy my time with Echoes of Wisdom. Eli, would you like to go next?
Sure. I also like this game. I wonder. I think I might like this game the most out of the three of us. And I'd also say that while there are definitely a lot of things I like about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, I like this game more. And I don't know whether I'd say I'd like it more than Link Between Worlds. I'd have to go back, but I'd say it's probably the best Zelda since Link Between Worlds for me. Um, I think its different approach to combat and puzzle solving fits well for not being Link, for playing as Princess Zelda. Um, and there are some absolutely delightful sections of this game, which on the whole I find pretty charming. However, there are still issues that hold this game back for me from making it into um, top tier Zelda consideration for me, as a pretty big fan of the series.
Lid, before you go, I would just like to give one little caveat for the audience. I definitely enjoy Tears of the Kingdom more than Echoes of Wisdom, but I could see Breath of the Wild liking this more. I don't know. I'd have to. They're very different games. This is probably slightly better, but it's complicated. Lid, would you like to give your opinion on Echoes of Wisdom now?
The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom is better than nothing. It loudly proclaims the triumph of facsimile over the void. I think it is the worst Zelda game I've ever bothered to finish. It is inoffensive, charming at times, and that's the nicest thing I can say about it.
For context for the audience, Lid, what Zelda games have you not finished?
I have not finished Zelda 2, Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, Skyward Sword, and Triforce Heroes.
Okay. Uh I'll be honest, I don't think I finished any of those games either. So we're in company on that. Um so I'm gonna start.
I finished Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. Those games are not worth finishing.
I hear Spirit Tracks might be. Spirit Tracks seems more, like it has more going on than Phantom Hourglass, from what I understand. Um,
I guess.
so let's. I think a good place to start with the content in this game is how do you, like, before we talk about anything else, how do you guys feel in a game where Zelda has her silent protagonist, finally is the protagonist in an official Zelda that is not in collaboration with Phillips? Um, how do you feel about them making Zelda a silent protagonist a la Link?
It feels
Fine by me.
wholly
Oh, sorry, Lid.
perfunctory.
I would have been. I don't think it detracts from the experience, but you know what they should have done, Lid?
Hmm.
If Zelda is the protagonist and can't talk, then Link, who is not the protagonist, should talk.
Don't they come up with the excuse that nobody who's been inside the still world can talk at some point?
No, because there are multiple characters who talk who are inside the still world. Like the only thing
But
that
just that boy ain't right. Like
yeah. Yeah, the
that's
only
just Link.
thing being in or out of the still world changes is whether or not you can see um what is your partner's name again? I can't believe I'm forgetting this.
Try.
Try, yes.
Try.
Um which, you know what? That's something that I realized in playing this game. Not only is this the first 2D Zelda in 10 years or in 11 years, this is also the first Zelda game to have a companion character since 2010. Um which is it's kind of surprising that they went this long without one. I understand why, and I think Breath of the Wild. I mean, unless you want to count the the sages from, or not the sages, but the sages ancestors from Tears of the Kingdom, which kind of counts, but they don't really talk in the overworld.
No, I wouldn't really count that.
Um, Try is fine, is my opinion on her. She's certainly, I don't think, the worst companion character in the series. But when they do the, as they do with all of the Zelda companions, the sad parting ways scene, I did not really feel much, I'll be honest. I'm like, all right, uh, Lid, how did you feel about
You
Try?
know,
Oh, you know what, Eli, you can go since.
sure. I Try reminded me of a less charming version of Starlo from Bowser's Inside Story. Um, to be honest, I like until not that long ago, I would have told you that Fi was the worst companion, but I did play the HD version of Skyward Sword, and they toned down her interruptions a lot, and now I actually think that yeah, Try might actually be my least favorite companion.
Lid.
Yeah, I hardly consider Try to be a character in the first place.
Okay, fair enough. So I guess we'll jump right in and talk about not necessarily the first dungeon, but like I guess the opening of the game, including that. I think obviously it's a very smart decision to start with do Link as a playable character in the stock Zelda game formula. I do think it is funny when you go out and explore most of the world that it is like, oh, Link just picked up his sword and ran straight to Ganon's castle.
Yeah, I believe there's a NPC in the first town who says it took him like a week.
Yeah, no, and it's like, oh, so he didn't do the normal Zelda thing of helping out like he skipped out and left Zelda to do cleanup. Um, I think it is obviously smart to start this game off with Link. I like the opening well enough. Um,
Yeah, I think that the setup of Link immediately defeats Ganon, but as a result becomes ensnared by some greater threat, and Zelda has to take the charge. I think that that is an interesting setup.
I do one minor
It's
complaint.
very Symphony of the Night opening.
Yeah, yeah, very much. Um, I like, despite liking the Ganon boss fight quite a bit, I will say it is a bit of like I'm not saying you need to do like a Sonic Adventure 2 esque or Super Mario RPG esque team up where it's Ganon helps deal with the villain. But it would have been nice if he was a little more proactive in the story or involved. But I understand why they just let him be like another mook. Um, so then let's just talk about all three of these now, since we're here. This game has three stealth sections. It has the breaking into Hyrule
Yes.
Castle, Hyrule Castle, the dungeon, and then or breaking out of Hyrule Castle, the dungeon, and then the Deku prison later on.
It also
None.
has an optional one in Gerudo Town.
Which one is that?
It is in the second half of the game. You can go and um, they say, hey, if you can steal this treasure without getting caught, you can keep it, and you get the like pajamas.
Okay. I did not go back to any of the major towns outside of shopping spots, so that's interesting to learn that there is new content in some of them. Um, my thoughts on the stealth sections. Zelda's had worse outside of outside of the Deku prison. I know Eli disagrees with me on this. I didn't think any of them were bad, but it is like it's not particularly good stealth. I think like it's fine. Eli, as the number one stealth game fan, what did you think of these sections?
I mean, I wouldn't say I particularly loved any of them. I actually found the deck one the least offensive to me, because I cleared it first try.
I did not.
So
I
that
got
wasn't,
stuck
or
on
not
that
first try,
one.
second try. But I got, oh god, the high roll. That is my least favorite dungeon in the game because all the dungeon is are stealth segments and combat rooms. So yeah, I mean, I just think that's the worst one in the game.
And I like a
Um,
Zelda game when it has good combat rooms, but I wouldn't say any of the combat rooms in this game are particularly exciting. They're not bad, but
I don't think it's as bad as the stealth section in Breath of the Wild.
no, no. I would also say Phantom Hourglass and Ocarina of Time. Not the intro, but the Gerudo Fortress are worse. But Breath of the Wild might be the worst in the
I've never had
series.
a problem with the Gerudo Fortress actually, but I kind of didn't even think of Phantom Hourglass because I think my brain wants me to repress all memories I have of playing that game. God, that game's egregious.
Lid, what did you think
But
was the
anyway, yeah,
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I think I think calling them stealth sections is generous, and I think that they have the same when they are frustrating. They have the same problem that I think virtually every gameplay segment of the game has, which is sometimes you just don't have the thing that you're supposed to.
Yeah, that is so I think this is a good like thing to talk about now. In general, like the ecosystem in general, but also like I think it is funny you say that, like because something that I remember both of all three of us kind of agreeing is that like oh it would be nice if Zelda games had it where you got new abilities and upgrades past the tutorial area again. And this game does a lot of that. Theoretically, there isn't. Like, a lot of the echoes are just like variants on similar concepts. Some of them are slightly better, and a lot of them are just like, yeah, this is just another enemy. It attacks things. It walks and attacks things. But yeah. Um, I liked the ecosystem, but I will agree. Learning, oh, there's a thing here that's way better. That would have been nice to do this with.
I never really felt that. I like the ecosystem a lot. I have a different problem with this game's combat system that uh, is related, which is the lock on, I think is pretty abysmal. But the echoes themselves, I felt like I was getting, new echoes pretty constantly and doing new things to them. Obviously, some of them are just, the level 2 and level 3 versions of them, but some of those are satisfying to get in their own way. But I felt like I was being doled out new things and finding new enemies at a satisfyingly consistent rate throughout the game.
Yeah. There are like I do think it is like it's not like Mega Man where you can just like figure out, oh, it's Intuit, like, oh, use
Well,
this here.
I mean, Mega Man stops being intuitive by the third game.
Oh yeah, true. But you know what I mean. Like the echoes are more like yes, there are ones that break the game, but there's nothing here that's like explicit. It's more figure it out. And, I like the ecosystem. I think it is very useful. I'm very glad that they also, in the form of a consumable leader meter, let you attack things with your sword. and other like link based items. Um, I think that yes, there are points where it's like, oh, it would have been nice to have this thing here, but I only ran into that like 2 or 3 times. And some of the times it's like, oh, I'll just come back later. That's fine. Um,
I had many times where I could not figure out a solution, where I tried being creative, and either did not have at no point did the game ever actually give me enough points, even at near full level. I am missing exactly one rift that only appears as part of a side quest, to actually do anything interesting. Every single time that I was missing the particular echo that I needed, it was something that I either assumed I could not killed an enemy, and its echo fell into a bottomless pit, and I did not realize that I had not picked that one up.
that is kind of annoying. Like I think yeah, it is dumb that you need to for non-inanimate objects like
Like
collect the
there, like
echo.
there are things that I can see, like the plat boom, the
Yeah.
thwomp type enemy. I can see that
Mhm.
they have changed the design from like the Oracle and Link's Awakening version of that enemy to make it more fleshy, to try and make it more obvious that it's killable. I saw that they gave the spinning blade enemies, they gave them an eyeball to try and make it more visually apparent. This is alive. This can be killed. This can be summoned, etc. But in general, the ecosystem serves only to remove the structure of Zelda items, and I think that that's precisely what made classic Zeldas so strong, was their structure and their pacing, and I think that is completely missing here.
I would disagree with that on some level. I think I get what you mean by it is a little too abstracted, but I do feel like the game was pretty good about like we're going to introduce you a bunch of echoes in the area and you're going to use these a bunch in the area on top of the ones that you use constantly. And I think that like that's fine, but I do agree that like there is kind of a even when I liked the dungeons and felt they were very good video game levels, there is something I think a little bit lost in these dungeons compared to the best of classic Zelda dungeons. In a lot of them. Although again, this is the closest the series has been since A Link Between Worlds, which is very welcome.
Yeah, I definitely prefer the my favorite dungeons of these to the Divine Beasts or the temples in Tears of the Kingdom. But I also would not put any of these among my very favorites of the series. My real issue with the structure is more on the macro level, that you can just go anywhere in the world very
Yes.
very quickly after finishing the first dungeon, which is a problem that they don't that Nintendo does not see as a problem. Um,
So I will say this: unlike
it
with
bothered me a little bit. It bothered me a bit less because I do think there is progression within biomes of getting new stuff and then using that new stuff more particularly in that biome than you would in another biome. But there still is an issue there that I definitely concur with if you compare it to something as tightly designed as like Oracle of Ages.
so something that I want to say about how I played this game after the first dungeon is that I basically like before I did the Hyrule Castle dungeon, I only went into the Gerudo. I explored some of General Hyrule Field, but I only really explored the Gerudo and Zora. And I did the later 3 dungeons in a specific order. And I think that's something that I appreciate is that like yes, the game does want you to go anything, but there is a like clear, more intended order and structure that you can also just follow where it's like, hey, like, yeah, you can break this. But unlike with Breath of the Wild, where if you do um the like the difference between this and a Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is if you just do all of the dungeons in a relatively like straightforward order, like you do Gerudo and Goron, then you do Hyrule Castle, or Gerudo and Zora, and then you do Hyrule Castle, and then you do Goron, Deku, and Snow. You do get to see and follow every area of the game in a mostly sober way. Whereas if you just like do the dungeons in order in Breath of the Wild immediately and do those quests, or in Tears of the Kingdom, you still have not touched most of this game. Whereas as this game is like, all right, we will like if you follow, there is a linear order to follow, which is what I did, and I got to the sense that I've seen everything in the game, even if there is stuff that I
It's
missed.
what I did too, and I think you're right about that. There is an issue though, which is that I feel like these games need to stop having an emphasis on vertical traversal. Because
This
it,
is
like
I
the,
think one of the interesting things about the game is I think that it is people have said, right, like, oh, the this project started out as like a Zelda maker or something, and they salvaged parts of it from that. And I don't think that that's entirely false, but I do think that even more so than that, this is a game made up of accidental side effects of remaking Link's Awakening. The fact that the game is 3D and has a third axis, that being vertical traversal, but that it a completely mutable element of the game. Right, like just that there's a certain absurdity, like checking for Mew under the truck, of being able to walk on top of trees
Yes,
in a
I
quote unquote
love
2D Zelda.
I love that because it felt like I was playing a Pokemon game with wall hacks as a kid
I
again.
and that's the thing, is that this doesn't feel like a game. This feels like clipping through the map in Gmod.
I disagree. I think that there are enough secrets in the trees. There's enough like caveats that to
That's a
me
weird thing to me as well. I feel like half the heart pieces I got in this game were just sitting out in the open.
that is fair. There were a lot of
yes,
those.
and there are some which are also done well. Like there's some where I had to go through a whole cave, or I like the fact that they brought back Smog from Oracle of Ages, and you have to fight him twice, and that's a
I
fun
didn't find where
little
that
side
second
quest.
fight was.
One is in the Eastern Temple, the other is you have to revisit the like most southeast part of the Deca region,
Oh
and
yeah, I only
yeah, so you
did
get to find.
the Eastern Palace fight.
I actually do wonder if there was supposed to be an Oracle remake at some point, because Smog and Manhattan both appear in this game. Um, but yeah, no, I think that the vertical traversal is something that the series should lean away from.
I
Now,
agree.
again, I like the ecosystem a good deal because it lets me do a lot of funny things, such as during the um, Gerudo Temple Link fight. I just kept summoning the blade traps and slowly whittle down all the links in a way that was very funny and satisfying to me. Um, but at the same time, yeah, the macro structure of Zelda needs it needs more constraints.
I would agree with that. I think you're very right on the money, but I have two counterpoints that I want to make up. The first is that I think that this is a necessary step for Nintendo because they wanted to see, okay, what is Breath of the Wild? What is a kind of even mix between Breath of the Wild style progression and classic Zelda style progression? Even if you think this leans more one way or the other or lacks that, and I think it is smart to make that game so they know. I think I think future Zelda games will benefit from this game's existence.
Make your other point, but I want to come back to this.
Okay, we can do that. And the other point I have is that, like, yes, you are lacking things like the Pegasus boots and other movement tech, but I appreciate how this is the Zelda where you do the most platforming. There is a lot of platforming in this, and I don't mind this. I think that also I like this kind of platforming more than something like an isometric game, like, say, Super Mario RPG or Sonic 3D Blast.
It was very funny when you streamed Super Mario RPG how many times you missed jumps in that game.
Yes.
But anyway,
Lid, would you?
but
I'll let you rebuttal to whatever point you want to.
So you say that that this is like, something that this is a movement, right? That this like opens things for like the future of the Zelda series. But I kind of feel like one of the biggest problems that the Zelda games have right now is that they are all, for the past decade, too in conversation with themselves. I feel like even Link Between Worlds to some extent, with things like the meter, having like a magic meter for every item instead of picking up individual bombs and arrows and things like that. I feel like Breath of the Wild, like not having source, having this game where everything is just like a something you don't have direct control over. I feel like it has been a long time since we've gotten a Zelda game that actually is itself, that actually is a fantasy adventure without some kind of, well, we can't just do that again. We can't just have someone exploring a world and going on a quest. There has to be, oh, you you summon chairs with a staff, and that's the right. Like every game is too much. Well, what does a Zelda game look
no,
like
I
without
think that,
items? What
by
does
the
a
way, I
Zelda
think
game
Link
look like
Between
without
Worlds,
direct combat?
I
I think Link Between Worlds is definitely in conversation with, like, if that's, I would not like exclude that from like being like
Yes,
what you're
like I would,
saying.
like, as much as I hate to admit it, because again, I have not finished the game. Who knows, maybe the HD version would remedy some of my problems with it, but I feel like Skyward Sword was the last real Zelda game we got in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like other than having to be about the lore of the Master Sword, which is thrown in there, it really is a pretty straightforward, like, it is telling us an earnest story in that way, which I would agree that Echoes of Wisdom is not. It is like, I also give it more of a pass because I do feel like, for me, this is a spin-off. This is, wouldn't it be fun if Zelda did this rather than um trying to be in the same conversation as um my favorite Zelda game in
so
the series.
I was kind of expecting to save this till the end, but we're on it now, so I might as well bring it up now. Part of the reason why I think I'm so okay with this is that, like, and maybe it's, I definitely want this, but it feels like, is I feel like whatever comes next, the next Zelda is going to be weirder and different. Like, it feels like this is the last game in the tipping point, and it makes sense to be like, well, like, because Breath of the Wild was the big jump. Echoes of Wisdom was like, or Tears of the Kingdom. My apologies. Was like, here's a bunch of like, how far can we put these mechanics on this system, on this engine, like in the same map. And I feel like do like it doesn't, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am giving Nintendo's expectations and the Zelda team's curiosity too much hope, but this feels like kind of the last iteration on that, in the sense of like, yeah, like it only feel like with them applying this kind of gameplay to a 2D Zelda, I feel like whatever Zelda game comes next, it has to have like two things, and I think that they will do both of these things, which is be either not in Hyrule or like Wind Waker and Skyward Sword, where it's a radically different take. And I think that there will be some sense of like you're like I think there is a very good chance the next 3D Zelda game doesn't have a hang glider. I think that is the obvious direction to go now. And try that and like limit climbing and do that. And so it makes sense for me from the perspective I feel like Zelda is at and how where it's been going to like, yeah, no. Why not apply that kind of system to 2D because we haven't done it before? I agree that if if this game doesn't go in the way I'm expecting it to, or if the series like kind of flatlines, I could see myself feeling a bit more negative retroactively. But for what this is, I'm like, no, I respect this decision, but that could change in the future.
My argument is that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom sold infinity copies, and so I don't think that they're going to um, not have sandbox type structures in
Yes, I could have
3D and 2D
sworn that
Zelda going
they've
forward.
already
Well,
confirmed that the next one will be in this style
I
still.
don't think they said that. What I think I'm pretty sure what they said is we're not going back to the Ocarina of Time style. What I'm saying is that like they make something that is like building on this but going in a more limited direction. Like where it is like it is still a very freeform explorative game, but with like less the limit the vertical like what does open world Zelda look like when you can't climb stuff, but it's still designed like that. Maybe that's giving them too much
I don't know.
credit.
I don't know. That's just speculation, and I don't know if we're really here to talk about
No,
that.
no,
But
this is off topic. Again, this is why I want to save this for the end, but I figured since we're here, I'd bring it up. I
sure.
again, whatever happens next, I'm really happy that we spent the past year with them. I hope past couple games with them, but like, yeah, we probably don't need Zora, Gorons, Gerudo, um, back anytime soon. I think we're good on those. Um,
I was really happy to see the Decker Scrubs back again.
yeah,
It had been so fucking long.
I guess what I mean is like mainly normal Hyrule stuff that is in every Zelda.
Yeah,
So going back into the game, how did let's talk about the dungeons now. Eli, I know you were a little hotter on that first dungeon than I was. My thing with it is that I liked it, but like it is the most vanilla flavored Zelda dungeon I have ever played. And I kind of was like, oh, are all of the dungeons going to be this vanilla? And they are not. But I was worried about that when I played it, and I still don't think it's like particularly great in its own vacuum. It's just like, oh, it's nice to do this again.
it's nice. I think like the reason I rate it a little bit higher is because at that point you only have a certain amount of echoes going in, and you're only going to get the echoes in that dungeon so far. And I think they dole them out at a reasonable pace, and you get the ones that you need. Um, and the dungeon feels a little bit better structured than the like one of the next ones, which is the Zora dungeon. I wouldn't say this dungeon is like amazing, but I think it's perfectly solid for its place in the game at the beginning.
Sure, I can agree with it is a perfectly good opening thesis statement. Um Lid?
Um, I don't remember any of the dungeons in this game aside from the snow one. I couldn't tell you what any of the other dungeon gimmicks were if you put a gun to my head, and I'm convinced that they didn't have any.
That is not true.
Yeah, I agree with Eli, but I do get why Lid says that. Because it's like, these are normal Zelda dungeons, But they're like diet Zelda dungeons that are not willing to go. Speaking of which, I my expectations were a bit too high when I walked into a room and saw, oh, you got to hit 5 switches to open a big door. It's classic Zelda again. And that's like, oh, it's still pretty like Tears of the Kingdom like dungeon
That is,
design.
yeah, no, that is every, yeah, that is like everything
But it's
except for
also
one.
like, well, that's
6 switches
also
and
the
open the
forest
big door.
temple. That's also the forest temple design. That's the water. Like it's like, oh, you got like a more complex path. Uh,
Forest Temple, I don't want to alarm you, but there are two ugly bitches right next to you.
uh,
Um, no, I like the thing is actually going back to Ocarina of Time. I think that my conspiracy theory, which has no actual basis, is that people complain for years and years about the water temple being too hard, and now the water dungeon has to be, even in a game where I don't think any of these dungeons are particularly hard outside of a couple moments where I did get stumped very briefly. Like these are all easier side for puzzles. But like water has to be the most, you know, baby dungeon.
I
And that's been
liked.
true since probably Link Between Worlds going forward.
That's fair. I will agree. I liked the water temple because I felt like it had a bunch of fun platforming challenges. Like it used like I am always down for a water level that's gimmick is, hey, try and stay out of the water as much as possible. Um, and like do creative ways of doing that. And I think that's neat. Um, you know, I also think other at combat echoes are great, but anytime I'm underwater, shout out to the shark echo. The shark echo is so good. It's one of the best echoes in this game.
Yeah, it is the best, certainly the best underwater echo for sure.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal. Um, the Gerudo dungeon, well, was all right. I also do like that they are keeping in with the Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, I guess Skyward Sword approach as well of like getting to the dungeon is as has as many steps as doing the dungeon itself.
I
Approach.
felt like it became pretty formulaic. I felt like at a certain point it was just like, oh, I'm gonna do 2 or 3 small voids, and then I'm gonna go to the big one with the dungeon in it.
You know what? Let's talk about the void system now. Lid, we compared this to Twilight Princess, and you said you found them annoying, and I get why you do. Of the sense of like, first off, it is lame that they only have one piece of music for when you're in the voids proper. That's not great, and there's so many of them. But I never minded the voids because you're still just doing normal gameplay. Where the problem that I have in something like Twilight Princess is they make you not only are you doing the less interesting gameplay, but I also think mechanically Wolf Link does not care. Like I think the first 2 areas in Twilight Princess are fine, but that like are mostly fine. But that Lanayru one is way too long for what Wolf Link is like mechanically brings to the table. Whereas this, I liked. I was fine like none of the voids stand out, and I can understand that they do drag out on this. But it's like, yeah, these are basically normal levels. I'm fine with them for what they are, and the enemy variety and stuff that it's like, oh, it's just a chunk of the overworld, but slightly different. I think this works.
I don't think these are. I'm gonna, I guess, split the difference between both of you and say that I don't think that these are as strong as, say, the Twilight Princess sections. But I also, they're over and done so quickly that, I don't. For me, they're just uh little preambles to dungeons that I don't really have a strong feeling for against.
I don't like that. I think that the biggest problem with them is that they exist in combination with such a mutable overworld that this has basically become like a Fallout, like an open world square game, like an Elder Scrolls, where I just look around the map and drill my way down into 20 identical dungeons.
You know, it's maybe a little harsh, but I don't think you're necessarily wrong for saying these feel like Skyrim dungeons. I definitely get that comparison.
Like if Twilight Princess had, you know, those little caves that are just like they're just like a tree structure. You find a couple pieces of heart and some rupees or whatever. And now there's like what, like two or three in the game. There's like one in Hyrule Field. There's one in Lake Hylia. Maybe there's one somewhere else. If Twilight Princess had like 20 of those, that would get old.
That's fair. That
Did you
I
have a? I forget because it's been like over a year since we talked about it. Did you have one of the caves
Um,
in Tears of the Kingdom? Like I don't remember
no,
because I feel
no.
like
I
these are
mean, I
kind of
don't
the
think they
same
were the
thing.
most memorable part of that game. I think that the difference is that the caves, thinking about it for 2 more seconds, I don't actually think there are any similarities at all. I think that the caves
How
are
so?
I think that in terms of their placement within the game, they're completely different. How they're just a geographical feature of the world. Two, a lot of it is centered around like the gathering equipment specifically, and three, I just think that like the thematic sensation of exploring a unique aspect of the environment that was for one thing largely missing from the prior game, and like the fact that they're unique. I'll be straight up, skipping ahead a bit. The final area of this game was one of the most disappointing things, period, in any recent video game. It was literally like like when you go to that final still world void and it's just like all different parts of the world mashed together. I was just like, oh my god, this is the RPG Maker game I made in middle school.
Yeah, yeah, I think that
I don't. I find
works in the
I
sense
don't
of
really have a
like,
problem with the caves game. I don't really have a problem with caves in Tears of the Kingdom, but I think they are much closer to like Skyrim dungeons than these.
yeah, I get that. I don't know. I agree with the I think the final I think that I was less disappointed with that. I agree why you don't like it, but the thing is that like that's not the final area, and I don't think the final area was particularly interesting. But as like a the area that leads to the final area, I think it worked for what it was. I was like, "Oh, that's cute." Um And I liked that you didn't have to go through all the areas in order. There were like shortcuts you could take and go around, and I appreciated that. Um, so the Gerudo dungeon's pretty good. Uh,
Yeah, I
I,
liked it. I think it has a nice degree of
I
nice
think
linearity to it.
the Gerudo might have. Actually, I'll say, yeah, I think it does have the best implementation of the dungeon lead up in that like you're like the twist of like oh you're dealing with an evil like void person who's lying. That was like satisfying, and then the dungeon itself with its like its multi-layered approach, the fact that there were like kind of like its enemy design was kind of aggressive, and I love how many different enemies there are. I know it's like most of them are probably in Link's Awakening remake, but it's like oh this is really charming and nice.
No, I mean some of them are, but there's a lot of original assets for this game.
That's good. That's good.
Uh,
Even where
Again, like
they
they're not necessarily new enemies. There are a couple, but like they're reused enemies. But no, there are a lot of unique enemy types in this game.
even where unique aspects do exist, you know, a couple new models here for you know, a slightly different moblin or a new chair. It really feels like all of a sudden all of these things that were like 12 by 12 sprites in Link's Awakening had to be 3D. Suddenly these 2D movement vectors and these individual sprites had to be animations and had to be 100 times more complicated. this chair couldn't just be one bitmap. It suddenly had to be an entire object in itself, and it feels like this game's entire structure is built on a sort of a sunk cost fallacy of not wanting to waste the work of having done that.
I think that's a little too harsh. I think they brought enough of like the charm to the table, and I also think that like that's part of why like the things that make Echoes of Wisdom charming, even mechanically, but like its asset reuse is what makes a lot of series on like the PS2 and Game Boy Advance and DS like work so well. Obviously the fact that this is four no, God, 5 years after Link's Awakening remake, I do think is like, oh wow, it really took you. I mean, I guess there was COVID, but like it took this long. But I don't know. I'm not judging that much. I also appreciate the learning that like this game has a lot of similarities and it's reusing stuff. It is not the Link to the Past map. And it has fun twists
You
on the
know,
Link to the Past map that I liked a lot.
do you know what the map of this game feels like to me?
What does it feel like to you?
What?
I would not be shocked in the slightest if the way that they designed this map was they took the Link to the Past overworld and they put it through one of those AIs that'll tell you what's outside the edge of the Mona Lisa.
No.
I,
You're
I
no.
don't. Under-
You're
That's
you're
stupid, man.
you're wrong. Like I get why you're saying, but it's like yeah, there's a lot of like you have the Eastern Palace and you have like the desert in the corner. But
Well,
like
like literally, like if you look at the structure and you look at like where like certain landmarks are, like where like it literally is just, oh, it's like a Link to the Past map in the middle with some changes. Obviously, like Link's house isn't there and there's nothing under the bridge, but like then there's just this extra border to it where they've added more stuff.
it's not I get why you're saying that, but I think that like that works like to me of like yeah, the Link to the Past map as a template of like here's a bunch of recognizable landmarks. But and I know you're going to get mad at
I mean,
me and
it
say
does
it that's
probably.
nothing like
Yeah.
each other, but I don't think that like this map is evocative of Link to the Past in the same way that Twilight Princess is evocative of Ocarina of Time's map to me personally. Um
I'm not even
I
uh
don't really
100%
think
sure
those
what
maps
point
are
you're
that.
making.
I mean
Yeah.
they're pretty similar in the sense of like you've got like you go to Kakariko Village and Goron like they're not like this is obviously more similar, but it is like they are trying to like like there is a very like baked in of like this is kind of like this is building on the concepts of the previous map in similar ways, even if this is a lot more blatant. And I
I
think that
don't think that
what
Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess are particularly meaningfully comparable in terms of geography. And I think that the most flattering thing that I can say about the similarities between the maps of Echoes of Wisdom and A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds is that the fact that this game's geography is completely mutable is a difference.
no, we'll talk about this later, but there are things that I really appreciated with how they reorganized it.
No, I
Um,
mean the map definitely does hew to Link to the Past, but I really do think that, like you're saying that like a lot of this does come from Link's Awakening asset reuse, and really like a lot of it does not. And I feel like you're kind of underemphasizing just how
yeah,
much of these are not reused
the
for
thing that I
Link's
liked
Awakening.
about this map was how like there was a ton of like oh this is normal Hyrule Field exploration with the main areas explored out, which is standard Zelda stuff, but I think it was done well here. And there are a ton of areas where I think that like they build upon. Like I really liked how they for the last major real area of the game, the Snow Mountain was kind of similar to the climb up Death Mountain and Link to the Past, but radically reimagined because Mount Nehru is fucking freezing. I think they do that very well. I think that like reintegrating areas like the Zora Swamp, or not, sorry, the Deku Swamp into it feels natural. I really like the spin on like the like, yes, the core locations are similar and there might be some repeated asset use, but this does feel like a very like this is a thought out and well designed Zelda map, I think.
It's not necessarily asset reuse in the sense of like, oh, this texture's the same or this model's the same. It's the whole, not necessarily engine, because who knows what engine this was made in, but the general programmatic structure of Link's Awakening, right? The work of taking a Game Boy game and turning it into a 3D game that you could charge $60 for is immense enough and is so unrelated to the actual necessary parts of a Game Boy game that they essentially did need to make an entire separate game to remake Link's Awakening inside of. And it is that structure that I feel like Echoes of Wisdom is that structure without an actual meaningfully directed game experience put back into it.
See, I
See,
don't agree with that because I
yeah.
find that the echoes are, you know, bringing a new take um, on something like a Redead or a Rope or a Dark Knot.
And I also think that um like, yes, that's the case, but I also think that like it makes sense to have the Zelda game, the first Zelda game where you play as Zelda, be structured in a Hyrule like this. I think that is kind of deliberately the point, and I think it works. I do think that and this might be projecting too much on you, Lid, and I apologize if I am, that part of the problem here, which I get, is that Echoes of Wisdom is a game kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time for you, where it is emblematic of a lot of like broader industry like examples of like design and stuff, and also the it is a quintessential Switch era Zelda game. Like in every like, and those kind of factors are kind of dragging me, and I do get that.
Perhaps.
Um, you know what I'll say about this game? It's not the best, but there are enough good songs in this game where I'm like, yeah. Like I like the overworld core main theme is pretty good, even if it is just Zelda's lullaby. Multiple of the dungeons had songs that I liked. So like
You know, that
I
something
can't remember anything, to be honest.
I liked the overworld theme, and you say there are aspects of it where it is clear that they've taken from Zelda's Lullaby, but something I think is interesting, correct me if I'm wrong, is this the first time that a Zelda game's main theme has been in something other than 4-4?
I don't know enough about music to tell you that.
I
I don't
think,
remember the main theme of this game, to be honest.
hmm, well, I just think it's obvious that in Ocarina of Time, Zelda's Lullaby and perhaps even the music system itself were designed such that Zelda's Lullaby would be pressing the C buttons in a Triforce formation. And so I wonder if that was an intentional choice to make the main theme of this game in 3-4 as a further reflection of Zelda's theme and its relation to the Triforce,
By the way, this is
etc.
first game since Link to the Path. It is kind of funny, like thinking about how this is kind of similar to Echoes of Wisdom, or not, to Link Between Worlds narratively, in the sense of like a third party factor who is a villain connected outside of the standard Zelda formula wants the Triforce. I will say, I think the like halfway through this game, Lid explained what the villain was, and I was like, oh, that's lame. The way they handled it and bringing back in the three goddesses and some of the other stuff made me go, no, this is like, it's not like Girahim or Vadi or like a really cool original villain, but there's enough here to be like, oh, I think this works for what it is. Um,
I
The
think
villain
this
actually reminded
is
me of Bellum from Phantom Hourglass.
yes, yeah, that's what I was gonna say was that either this or that are the worst Zelda
I
villain.
the only thing I know about Bellum is that he is in the DS Zelda games, so that's not a good sign. Um,
I
And
mean
also, no, the worst one is
he's essentially the same thing.
it's
He's
this,
just a
yeah.
generic evil spirit.
I don't know. I think you're right,
But
but I do.
the worst one, by the way, is the little leprechaun from Spirit Tracks. That's the worst one.
I do think that like the like it's not, but I think like that's the thing is that like it in and of itself is not particularly interesting, but I do find its connections with the three goddesses and the fact that it has history and they used it as an excuse to bring them back. I'm like, oh, that's nice. I like that. It's kind of the fact that it's also about the Triforce though does make me go, yeah, I kind of wish Ganon was a little more involved in this game's plot because he is the other third. Um, uh, I thought the story, obvious like this game's story is very kids game, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I think it's well executed and has cute moments and charm. The one thing that did kind of bug me is that none of the other characters, and for a lot of them it does make sense, like the Yeti and the Dekus, but it is like shouldn't want like I think the only person who does recognize who Zelda is or is like vaguely aware is the Caesora like princess or queen or whoever. But like someone should have like recognized who Zelda was immediately and been like, "Hello, Princess Zelda. Thank you for your help." Um one of the things that
I
I
mean, she is in disguise.
well, yeah, even when she's not in disguise though. One of the things that I did um like about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's plot is that while it wasn't everywhere, there was a general sense of community in Hyrule that like Impa and the main tribes like they were aware of each other and knew who they were and kept in some level of contact. And I kind of miss that like basically no one in Hyrule knows who anyone else is and every part is cut off from each other. Um but I thought the story overall was fine. It was a cute little Zelda story, and it had enough all right moments and fun character stuff that I'm like, yeah, this works. um,
There, like, I like there are specific beats in not the main plot line, but in a couple of the regions which I like, which are the Deku and the Yeti. But the other ones are a little weak.
yeah, I
That's it.
thought the Yeti was one of the better ones. I actually by the end I'm like, you know what, I like this. Um,
Yeah, that's what I said. The Deku and the Yeti are
oh
the
yeah,
ones I
yeah.
liked.
I think probably in terms of character writing, the Goron story wise was probably the weakest in the sense of like, oh, everything about this it's arranged differently, but everything about this was kind of in the Goron section of Tears of the Kingdom. There's also
Yeah, no, it's
like
really
like
weak.
I'm like
The only thing I like, yeah,
yeah, it's we've got a young inexperienced leader of the Gorons, and there's only the elders left. And it's like, oh, we did this before. We also did crack. We also did an addiction plot in Zelda games. Although I do think this I like how like the how it affects the Gorons in the sense of there are people in Tears of the Kingdom you have history with and care about. But I think that it is maybe told a little better in with the Deku's in the spider webs and Goma's addiction, and like it makes more sense. But yeah, it's not particularly compelling.
no, I liked how the Dekus just they kind of know that it's bad for them, but they also
Yeah,
don't care.
yeah, that is funny.
Um,
It's not like
and they're
brainwashing. Like
yeah, and they're not like the Gorons are funny in Tears of the Kingdom. How like they want to like rob you and shove you to get or their crack rocks, but in this they're just like we're just gonna throw you in jail. Like, fuck you.
And the one guy's like, man, I really like this, but I'd rather have a house.
Yeah. I
But I thought that
really
all the
like
Deku stuff very charming.
I really like, generally speaking, how the Dekus view themselves as more civilized and the rest of the world as the backwoods.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, which is like kind of what the Zora used to be. But then they're not. Like the Zoras, like they're pretty bland in this game. Even though like there are two kinds, I thought that we were gonna go more into that, and they didn't. So the Deku just being like little bratty entitled shits is really
I mean, it's in
it
character.
makes you really glad that they brought them back. Yeah, I'm just glad that they're back.
Yeah. Talking, I do think that like Goron of the later three dungeons is probably the weakest. Like it's fine. It's got a Metroid style. It's got a escape from the lava sequence, which is cool, and like some of the gliding sections are fun. But it's not like nothing about it is like super standout. I think. Um,
Yeah, I mean the only like real standouts to me are the Gruta Sanctum, the Pharaon Temple, the Linear Temple. So
Pharaon's pretty good. It has like it's very fun in like the kind of Indiana Jones very classic adventure like dangerous temple feel it has. With like the darkness and like it's a very trap. It's the most trap focused dungeon in the game, which I like. Um,
it's very trap focused. It has a lot of entrances and exits. I like the darkness in it. It has the only point where I was stumped in the
yeah,
game for a little bit, and it had to actually
because
think,
there's so many different
which was
outside
the
exits.
room where you're locked in. Yeah, the room where you're locked inside of the room you can't escape until you solve the puzzle, and it was making sure that the Armos statues both let you like create two echoes and they
Yeah,
bounce on different tiles at the same time. I thought that was a really good use of that echo, and I hadn't done the Lineru temple yet, so for me,
same.
figuring it out in that room was that was just a satisfying moment. And I also like that they brought Manhandla back, and it worked kind of like um that asshole skeleton in Link's Awakening.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's just fucking chase thing, and
Um
I liked that it wasn't the main boss. I liked that it was a mini boss to get the boss key. Um,
yeah. So that was my favorite dungeon. I like the atmosphere a lot.
uh, okay, Lid, I know me and Eli did basic. Well, no, Eli, we did the back half of the dungeons. Eli did Gerudo first. I did Zoro first, which is the recommended thing. How did you do the last three? What order did you do them in? Because me and Eli did them in the same order.
I did the Goron lead up and then the Deku lead up and then the Goron dungeon and then the Deku dungeon and
Interesting.
then Lineru.
So you did them in the same order, but you went back and forth. I basically I'm working on this area. I'm gonna stay in this area until I'm done with it, and I think that is much like one of the things that I realized playing Breath of the Wild is when you enter the most fun way to enter a new area for the first time is just by resisting temptation to climb over shit and just taking the main road and seeing where that takes you and following that along. I think it is like this game is at its best. Yeah, I would zip out for potions and stuff, but like to to sort of to deal with an area until you're done with it and do it in a like I think the more linear you play this game, the stronger it kind of it benefits from that. Um,
I would agree if it weren't for the fact that I quickly found myself in situations where, oh, I didn't climb up this mountain and go into this random cave, so I didn't have this echo, so I can't solve this puzzle.
Do you remember any of the specific puzzles that happened for?
There's one in the ice dungeon with a like raised platform. I remember specifically, I don't even know how you would get through the last dungeon without Plat Boom.
Plat.
Like there's a
Well, I
segment
mean,
where like you
Platinum you
need
would
to
have
get
gotten early on.
I d- If I hadn't looked it up online, I never
I
would have
think I
found
just
it.
used rocks to balance it out. I don't think I used. I think I did it without plat boom. Which I think I had.
Or we're talking about
I know that
like
there
the
was
one that like
a
kind of a
there
scale. Yeah, you
there
use rocks.
the the one in the Deku area with the heart-shaped lake or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That one was another one that like I tried to get creative. I came back when I had more points, and I still couldn't do it until I just now I have plat boom, so I can raise this thing and get through.
Yeah, it's funny. I barely use plat boom in this game for
Yeah,
things.
same. Like, and also I got platform really early on too.
Yeah.
But
Um.
it was up on top of a mountain inside the Gerudo area, so
Oh, I
I
don't think
was
I.
playing the game in the quote unquote linear proper way,
So
so I never
we
found
haven't
it.
done this yet. What do you remember? What your top five were? I think mine were bed, water, trampoline, table, and
What?
then the two moblins, the enemies that I used the most were the level one spear moblin and the fire zol.
Yeah,
Sorry, I just
my
want to go back real quick. What do you mean the platform was up in the mountain in the Gerudo area?
like around the Gerudo area, like
But the
the like
platforms
mountain
are
ridge that
everywhere.
surrounds it. That was the only place I could find one.
I don't know what you mean. The platforms are like all over this game.
Okay.
They're like in the linear path to progress.
My most used echoes were definitely the bed, water block, Ignisol, and the like level 3 sword moblin.
Yeah, I should have used that guy more. I used him in a ton, but I didn't find. I felt like his attack rate was a little too slow. Um, but yeah, he's definitely good.
But yeah, water block, bed, Ignis all bad guy, and definitely the level 3 Dark Knot. Once I got that, that was just really great. I mean, I used some other stuff in like different services when I had to, but like that was obviously the best.
For
Because
big
the
combat,
one of the
I
only two I
found
never
myself
found.
really liking the whiz ropes. I found they were very useful.
Yeah, they were good in like situations where I needed to like snipe things, and use range. And I know I use that fire whisrow a lot in the game.
Uh, Talking about the final dungeon, the final regular dungeon, I really liked that one. I thought the way, where I went, oh, it's mixing fire and ice. Hell yeah. I liked the climb up Death Mountain, how it evoked Link to the Past, but like was a lot more hostile because of the colder temperatures. I liked the Yeti character and got invested, and I liked that they didn't explain where his brother went. Like all of that is like, yeah, this is pretty solid stuff. The puzzles were good.
Yeah, I
The
like
music was
how
solid.
this like big of a cat-esque Yeti just never gets his family back.
Yeah,
So they're just dead.
I think
No,
that,
he's on an
yeah, the
adventure.
implication I think is brother is still out there somewhere, but dad is definitely dead. Um,
I thought his brother was the boss.
that might have been the well, no, because I don't
They
think
like
that.
explicitly say that he's not.
Yeah, because I think if he was the boss, because they do like that wouldn't like they like he would have just been floating in void. I don't like the helmet. That could be the implication, and that like
No, I assumed it was like a cursed helmet that his brother found that like turned him into that.
that's possible, but I think like I think Try would have just said that to him and not lied. I don't think Try is capable of lying in that sense, or the game would have like more
I
explicitly
think
said
Try
that.
is definitely capable of lying. It's just like, yeah, your brother, like, don't worry about it. We didn't kill
No,
him.
I don't think
Let's
because
do
she
that.
barely knows what human emotions are and like phrases of speech are. I don't think I and I think if she did that, the game would acknowledge it more. Maybe I'm
Agree to
underselling the
disagree then.
yeah. But yeah, I think that boss might also be the best boss in the game. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Uh,
they've done that like Fire and Ice kind of stuff before, and
yeah,
I
no,
I basically always liked it.
yeah, Twin Rova. But yeah, really good dungeon. The final area I think is shows the limitations of this system in the sense of like you have to give your items back to Link. This game's a lot less
Yeah.
I
fun.
didn't mind
When
that.
I think this game's
I
like
never liked the sword form.
no, I disagree. I used it constantly because it's like I want to attack things. Enemies don't attack things fast enough because their AI is dumb. I want to be able to spam at something, and every other enemy in the game has either a massive wind up or like in the case of like the like even when I'm locking on something will take a while to like actually shoot something that I want to. So having that is very useful, and it's like I get why you're doing this, and I think it's like smart, but it's like this combat system is not good enough to support any more sections without the link items, I think.
I thought that the boss fights were the most interesting aspect of the gameplay, how they have like a Kirby-esque rhythm where you dodge the attacks, then, the attacks like hit a wall or whatever, and they leave behind the little fragments that you use for your sword form meter, and then you retaliate.
Yeah, there are definitely some duds, but I think the best bosses in this game are on par with any 2D Zelda bosses.
The fact
No, I
that they
used
that the fact that
the
they
yeah,
revoke that ability for the final boss, which should be the most interesting and involved boss in the game, is unacceptable, I think. Like I
I
think
wouldn't go
that
that
and
far.
the fact that it's this giant like three phase thing, it's just a slug. There's
I
nothing about it that's
I
enjoyable.
think I disagree with that. I think the final boss would be fine if it was just dodge the enemies and then hit the big sphere. I don't like the point where it transforms into where it becomes a 7th gen boss fight where it's like, hey, hit the tentacles and also deal with all of the like I'm not saying you can't do it well, but almost never a good sign when a big phase of a boss fight is deal with all of the enemies that I'm spawning in. And it's like, no, I don't want to do that.
I mean, my echoes just took care of that. I thought it was really
Well,
like
yeah,
I didn't
when
like
they
the final
I,
boss,
well, here's the
they
but
thing.
took care of it, yes, but like there
M-
was there wasn't any it's not even there wasn't any challenge to it. Like
I just
there
oh,
was
I
just
died for
nothing
I
there.
that.
agree.
It was just you stood there
I
and you mashed the
yeah,
button
when
and
I
the things did the thing and that's it.
well, my thing is that like I have of like Link and the Echoes did not like it felt like maybe it's because I was a little pressed for time when I had to go to work relatively soon, but it felt like one of the things that I like is that like yeah that Kirby-esque loop of like when you do damage you can whip out sword form and just fucking beat down on the bosses and that feels very satisfying in like a time and like saving your meter doing all that is a good system. When it's just Link and you're spawning echoes it's just like yeah the enemies will deal with it but they don't deal enough
See,
as much damage as I want them to, or they don't, or they all have wind ups, or just don't attack the like. I want them to attack X and they attack Y.
all right. So I'm gonna disagree with both of you. Not in that I like the final boss. I do actually agree with Liv that it takes forever.
Yeah, it shouldn't have
But
had 3
I don't
phases.
feel. Yeah, it should not. It really should be like the first. Don't have the second phase and just make the first and third shorter.
No, I did.
Um,
I think cut the first phase and then have. You know what? Actually, I
but
thought
can
Lid.
I
Oh,
say my
sorry.
point I
Yeah,
was trying
yeah.
to
You
make?
say your thing.
Yeah. Having sword fighter form would not have made it like more interesting to me. And I actually don't like that loop of I would have preferred they never had the sword fighter form
Oh,
in
I
the game. I
disagree.
never liked using it. I felt like I was for like I used it when I had to, obviously, but only when I had to because I didn't
I
find it
think
fun
if
at
this
all.
game did not have sword fighter form as a crutch to use, this game would be a 6 or lower. This game would be a bad video game if you did not have sword fighter form.
For me, it
Yeah.
would probably go up like a full point if it wasn't in the game.
Yeah, no. And that's also like granted, one
So
of the things that I respect about Zelda is that like they never really fully reuse gimmicks. Like looking at like You never had a game that was about switching between kids and adults again. You never had a game that was about transforming into Gorons and Zoras again. You never had a game that was about shrinking down to small size. Like they generally are pretty good about that, but it is like I feel like this shows like this is cool. I'm glad Zelda got a game like this. There is not enough meat on these bones to make a sequel to this that is, I think, compelling enough. And I
Yeah.
would much rather just play as regular Link a lot of the time.
I I think I talked with you about this a little bit in private. And I recognize, right, that like after two, massive open world Zelda games, that there is an element of like, obviously you have to temper your expectations with a smaller scale game like this, but there was definitely an element of like, so many other Zelda games introduce a twist at some point. They introduce an additional dimension of what the game is at roughly the halfway point.
Yeah,
Master Sword and aging, whether it's continuing to find the seasonal elements throughout the game, right?
whether
Like
it's getting a
most Zelda
clone
games,
from the Four Swords in Minish Cap.
they they have a handful of things they introduce near the beginning, but then the real game starts halfway through. And I felt like the real game never started here.
I don't agree with that, and I like that this game because of the way I played it. That it's kind of like some of the later Mega Man games where it's like you get 2 dungeons now and 3 dungeons later, and doing that order I think helped. But I would agree that like, yeah, like this game might have been better if it was holding something for the back half in that like Zelda style. Like Zelda, like Twilight Princess gets a lot better when you can switch between regular and Wolf Link, etc. Like that is very true.
Wind Waker gets a lot better when they actually let you
Sail,
explore where
yeah.
you want to.
Yeah, that's true. That's also very true. Um, Going back to the a thing that I was gonna say, um, unless if would you like to have a rebuttal first, Eli, or are we?
No, I just kind of want to just finish up, and I just say
Okay.
that like Swordmaster, I didn't really mind having that taken away from me because I didn't really like using it. So
The one quick thing I want to say about the final boss is that Lid,
that's all.
if they had ended, I thought that the final boss was going to be in the swimming phase, and I was like, you know what that if they did that, you know what that reminded me of? Would have reminded me of how Amazing Mirror's like final gameplay segment is a space shooter you play over the credits of like this is kind of a
Mm.
weird choice, but whatever, I respect it. Of just like a we like this is what the final thing is. Okay. Um but
Cool.
yeah, that's I agree with Eli. I think there I guess is I know you want to finish up and I respect that. I do want to ask Lid and Eli, do you have anything else you'd like to bring up before we wrap things up?
I think the stamp guy is cute, but at the same time, I kind of wish it was Tinkle.
Yeah, I saw other people bring that up. He probably should have been Tingle. It's time to bring Tingle back.
Yeah,
Lid.
Tinkle should have. He deserves a second game.
I think he did get a
No, I won't
Japan
do that.
only second game.
Oh, really? I didn't know
Um,
that.
Yeah.
the one thing I want to bring up is bottles.
Oh yeah.
What's
That is like like bottles being in this game for fairies is like the human body still having an appendix. It's like, well, we just have like smoothies. Why do we need bottles at all? It's weird.
Yeah, it's like, okay, bottles are literally just for fairies,
Yeah.
which like feels kind of absurd, right? Like it's weird that like
Yeah.
like there's so many, being able to catch fairies and have them resurrect you like almost feels like not necessarily a secret, right? But it's like it's a fun little side effect of like having the butterfly net in a link, yeah, Link to the Past. or like, oh, a bottle is also for like holding items or holding milk or whatever. And the fact that it's like, no, these are just for fairies. But then you can also hold like 20 smoothies. It's like what, and that's especially since even like
And
a,
the smoothies are like worthless because like this game's so easy and you have
Oh, I
instant healing
disagree with
whenever
that.
you
For
want.
for the
Too.
thing is, for it's a number of things. Of one, I agree that they're less useful once you get Zelda bed, but it's like you can't consistently restore and health in combat rooms, so the smoothies are good for that. And two, until you got Zelda's bed, like the regular bed is so slow, I would rather die multiple times in a combat encounter than wait like 15 minutes when I have like a full row of hearts for it to go back to normal. That is, I get why they balanced it like that, but it's like I'm not waiting. I'd rather just chug smoothies. I used
and
a
the
triple
fact
digit number of smoothies in this playthrough, probably.
I used a lot of them because there's times
I usually make like two smoothies in the whole game. That's
there's
crazy.
like
Oh no,
there's
I
the moment where the frickin' you're in the ice place, you need to warm up to not get frozen.
yeah, there are points where like the
Oh, I just kept spamming the torch.
that works, but it's a little more convenient when you just have the fire smoothies. Although
But genuinely, like it like the simple fact that like you can hold 20 of them makes it like seem clear that like the game expects you to be doing a lot of these. The fact that they have like the side quests that are like make 30 different kinds of them or whatever. I don't think that I have spent this much time mindlessly mashing through menus since the launch version of Sonic Frontiers where you could only level up one at a time.
God, that was so bad. That was so bad. Anyway, I want to disagree with you. I understand why you're saying that, but I prefer this system of like you can only do two things in one smoothie. Makes it so much better. Whereas like if in Breath of the Wild, if you don't have one of the items, which they're very easy to find in Breath of the Wild compared to the Kingdom, but if you don't have one of the items that gives you like the full restore and extra HP, it takes like five things to make an acceptable cooking meal or whatever. Whereas in this game, it's like, oh yeah, no, I just used two of them and I have decent. And I agree, it did take a while, but it's like I only did that like five times. I feel like,
Yeah, for me, like I made like the initial smoothie, and then they're like, okay, make 10, and I didn't do that for a bit, and then eventually I came back and I did that, and then they said make 30, and I just no, these smoothies are my problem is the smoothies are underbaked, and as I said, I only use like one in the
yeah,
Ganon fight and then one in the first Smog fight, and like that was it.
yeah, I think this game does continue the fact that like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, in this game are kind of like the way Zelda games have been handling temporary stat boosts or perks is kind of weird, and it feels not as well thought out as something like other games may handle it, like say a Paper Mario or something with the badge
You
system.
know, I just thought I think that we shouldn't talk about the thing I'm about to bring up. I feel like we should just acknowledge that it exists, and in doing so, show how pointless it would be to even talk about it. Dompe's Automata.
I didn't complete that, by the way.
Yeah,
No, no, I said we're not going to talk about it because it doesn't matter.
I'm gonna blame that. I just don't like that it was Dompe. Like, not only is it useless, but also it's like this is Dompe. He's like groundskeeper Willie.
Um. Anyway, yeah, that's I think a good enough note to roughly end things on. Um, I feel like this is probably going to be it for a while in terms of new mainline entries. Like we'll probably get a remake within like 2 years or something. But I do think that like, yeah, given that like in the final year of this full year of the Switch, like before the Switch 2 launches, we got a 2D Zelda and then we got a 3D Zelda last year. It's like, yeah, we're not getting a new original Zelda game of any kind for like 3 years minimum, probably. Um, I hope we get a 2D Zelda game in like less than 5 years. That's all I'm asking is the next one. Um, but yeah. Anyway, if that's all we really have to say about this system and this game, Then that's our final thoughts on Echoes of Wisdom. I liked it. Liv thought it was mid, and Eli liked it more than me. Um, I don't know what the next game
Well, I guess,
is.
do we want to say like a closing statement on it?
Yeah, I guess I mean that's kind of I think my is that like I liked it. I didn't love it. I'm not interested in another game where you play Zelda in this style. I think this fully like scratches the itch. Maybe if they did it in 3D. Um, and I hope we get a new 2D Zelda soon, sooner than 11
Uh,
years.
I like this game. Again, like I didn't love it, but I like this game. I find the ecosystem very charming, but again, as you said, like that is maybe you can't do more with it because like so much of this is just reinterpretations of things that you already had, but now you get to use it. Now you get to do the things that are like might have annoyed you from Zelda enemies. You get to do to other enemies, so that's fun. Um, I like that this game consistently gives you new things throughout. At the same time, the game is basically at its best to me when it resembles most in a classic Zelda game. And so because it is this weird hybrid, um, yeah, like generally speaking, the more open world stuff is the weaker stuff to it, and the stuff that is more hewn to classic Zelda is when it clicked most for me. So the fact that like this is the closest we're gonna get probably um, one way or another. Um, just go back and play the Oracle games. Go and play a real banger. Um,
Yeah, I really should.
because this is only good, but it's basically never great.
Yeah, I think it has moments of greatness, but not many. Lid.
I do still stand by because I probably like have a little bit soured on Tears of the Kingdom since I played it. I think that might actually have higher highs, but it also probably to me has lower lows now that I think about it. So
It might. Tears of the
that's
Kingdom
it.
does have some low points for me, but I like it a lot more. Lid.
There are people in this world who will complain that Nintendo is outdated for releasing any video games at all that are not fully voice acted. I would say that 90% of the enjoyable time that I spent in this game was reading.
Yeah, there's
If
a
you want a game full of charming characters who say funny and cute things, that is here.
that is true. I would a bit like I wasn't a huge fan of the main story. I thought it was all right, but there is a lot of charming character stuff. Anyway,
If that's not what you want, steer clear.
yeah. Anyway,
And I also have one more thing to say,
sure.
which is just real quick. For me, like 2021, 2022, 2023, I would have made a case that yeah, Nintendo might have released my favorite video game of that year, and that's not the case of this year.
I
So we'll
might.
see what happens with the Switch
Well,
2.
I might end up liking Mario and Luigi. I don't know. I'll wait and see how people feel about it. But that is probably that. Like, there's a good chance there is not a Nintendo game in my top 5 this year. But this might be in here. I don't know. Anyway,
I think almost every game that I was actively looking forward to this year has been a disappointment, and there is no way that Game of the Year is not an indie game.
yeah, that makes sense. If I had,
My game of the year will also be an indie. Yep.
if I had a PC that could run it, I'd probably play Space Marine 2, or if I had a PS5, I'd probably enjoy FF7 Rebirth, but I don't, so I can't play those and be the judge of them. Anyway, see y'all whenever next time is. Bye bye.
See ya.
Bye.